They built a neighborhood on my land, streetlights, sidewalks, even a dog park. 120 homes, each sold for $500,000, each sitting squarely on what they thought was theirs. But it never was. Not legally, not ever. Because I had a plan. And they walked right into it. Ever seen an entire HOA realize, too late, that they've been living in someone else's trap? This isn't just real estate. It's revenge by contract, justice by GPS, and one hell of a quiet takedown. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more shocking real-world stories. My name is Davis Reed, 57, retired surveyor, quiet, polite, and apparently invisible, at least to the people who thought they could erase me from a map. I own land, not a backyard, not a patch of grass. Land, a long, narrow, 33-acre stretch of property that runs like a forgotten ribbon through the center of Pine Ridge Valley. It's land my father bought in 1973 for pennies on the acre. Land he refused to sell, even when developers came knocking in the 90s. Paper means more than promises, he used to say. Keep it filed, keep it clean, and let fools hang themselves. I didn't know what he meant until they started building. It began with a letter, one page, pre-printed, no signature. Dear property owner, the Pine Ridge Homeowners Association invites you to consider selling your parcel to support our expanding neighborhood vision. It was addressed to resident. No name, no research. I was the legal owner of parcel Labianwam 93B, land running directly through the southern tract of what they called Pine Ridge Phase 3. I didn't respond, because I knew what was coming. Next. 2 months later, bulldozers showed up. Orange flags went up. Stakes, tape, contractors. I watched them drive posts into my soil, pour concrete over my survey lines, and hold groundbreaking ceremonies on what was still, very much, mine. I took pictures. Every single day. Not to stop them, to trap them. See, I had 3 things they didn't: the original deed, digital timestamps, and a very quiet connection with the county recorder's office. While they laid plumbing, I filed updated easement boundaries. While they paved driveways, I updated my title protections. While they built houses, I obtained drone footage. They never noticed. Because the HOA president, a man named Evan Callister, thought he'd done everything right. He bragged at open houses, boasted about how we secured every inch of land necessary, used words like entitlement rights and squatter protection, except there's no such thing when your paperwork's faulty and the land's never been sold. And I had time, I had documentation, and I had patience. The tipping point came on a Tuesday morning. I was sipping coffee on my back porch, reading the paper, when I heard shouting from the lot edge. "Sir, you're not allowed back here. This is HOA property." It was one of their security hires, freshly shaven, badge on his vest like he was guarding the Pentagon. I raised an eyebrow. "I'm standing on my land," he snorted. "This trail's public. HOA maintains it." I pulled a laminated copy of my land survey from my coat pocket. "Not according to the county." That was the first time I saw fear in his eyes. By that Friday, I had received 3 voicemails. One from Evan Callister. "Hi, I think there's been a misunderstanding." One from their lawyer. "We'd like to propose a resolution that benefits all parties." And one from a very panicked developer. "Mr. Reed, please call us immediately. We may have built on your property unintentionally." Unintentionally. As if pouring 12 miles of underground wiring over land you never bought was just a clerical error. I didn't respond. Instead, I emailed a single sentence to Evan: "Check parcel number 1193B and zoom out 400 feet. That night, the HOA held an emergency board meeting. Closed doors, high tension, and too late. Because my trap wasn't just legal, it was engineered. You see, I'd spent 2 years watching this unfold, not with rage, but with resolve. I let them finish. Let them sell homes. Let them landscape. Let them get cocky, because I wasn't interested in stopping them. I was interested in owning them. What none of them knew was that my land had one very specific clause embedded in the deed, an old overlooked easement from 1985 that legally designated it as private agricultural access under county code. And any non-agricultural structure built on it, subject to removal or full lease negotiation. They built homes, pools, a private clubhouse, all without permission, all on land governed by a clause they never read, and I had every signature, every timestamp, every drone flyover the moment I knew I had them wasn't in court. It was when I received an HOA newsletter addressed to residents of Phase 3 listing rules for fencing, paint color, and lawn height, all while standing on my land. They tried to control me from inside my own property line. That's when I decided the time for watching was over. It was time to act. The letters went out on a Monday, certified, signature required, all addressed to individual homeowners of Pine Ridge Phase the Through. Every envelope contained a simple legal document. Notice of encroachment and demand for resolution. Followed by parcel coordinates, satellite imagery, and an itemized breakdown of where their property crossed the boundaries of parcel number 1193B. I didn't accuse. I didn't threaten. I documented. By Wednesday, my mailbox was stuffed. 12 homeowners wrote back directly, confused, worried, some even apologetic. But not the HOA. Evan Callister, their president, finally responded with an official letter. From the HOA's law firm, our clients categorically reject the assertion that any encroachment has occurred. The properties in question were developed in accordance with standard due diligence and recorded plats. That's the thing about confidence. It means nothing without verification, because what they didn't know was that 2 weeks earlier I had quietly hired a licensed surveyor from the county assessor's office, not a private firm but a state-certified official, to conduct a third-party survey of my land. Their findings? 37 homes had driveways built directly on my property. 4 had pools, 12 had fencing, 1 had a full gazebo, and the HOA clubhouse built dead center on the land my father never sold. When the news hit the neighborhood, it hit like a storm. People weren't angry at me. They were furious at the board. Homeowners showed up at the HOA office demanding answers. Some had already spent thousands upgrading their yards. One woman even burst into tears. She'd just refinanced her mortgage based on the equity in her improved backyard. That week, I received a knock on my door. A man in his late 40s, well-dressed, hands folded like a kid in trouble. Mr. Reed. I'm Daniel, lot 61. Listen, if I'd known, if anyone had told us, I nodded. You bought in good faith. I get that. What happens now? I held up a folder. That depends entirely on your HOA. See, I wasn't trying to make people homeless. I wasn't here for revenge against families. I was here to correct a system that thought it could bury a man with paperwork and never look back. That's when Eleanor stepped in. Yes, Eleanor again. A different one this time. Not a retired lawyer. An urban land consultant with a PhD in title history. She lived 2 blocks away, had watched it all unfold, and showed up with a grin and a laptop. I've followed this mess from the beginning, she said. You don't need a fight. You need a leverage map. Together, we made one. Every parcel, every violation, every easement, footpath, and pipe route that touched my land. We layered that over municipal infrastructure reports. Turns out, 3 utility boxes and a main fiber optic line ran directly through my easement. 1 tap of a legal key, and I owned their digital backbone. Eleanor leaned back, arms folded. They built a kingdom, she said. You own the bedrock. Then came the emergency HOA board meeting. This one wasn't behind closed doors. This one had over 90 residents packed into the local rec center. I wasn't invited, but I went anyway. People made room when I walked in. Homeowners turned their heads. A few nodded respectfully. Evan was already at the podium, red-faced and rattled. This is all based on a mistake. We are pursuing clarification with the county, and we urge residents not to engage in fear or panic. A man in the back stood up. What about my driveway? I got his letter. I'm on his land. Another woman. You told us this was approved. You made us sign compliance clauses. A third. You said no one else had claim here, Evan stammered. Our legal team is exploring. That's when I raised my hand, and the entire room turned to me. I have no interest in panic, I said calmly, but I do have interest in justice. I pulled out a folder, opened it, and handed copies to the front row. These are signed deeds. Plat surveys, county assessor validations, all showing you built your community on my property without consent. Silence. I don't want your homes. I don't want your yards. I want what's fair, what's legal, and what you ignored repeatedly, even when warned. Evan tried to speak. I cut him off. And you, sir, had 3 chances to respond before a single foundation was poured. The next day, my attorney sent a formal offer to the HOA, a 50-year lease agreement for all affected parcels, with yearly rent indexed to inflation, plus a one-time damages fee of $3.2 million for unauthorized development and loss of use. The terms? No homeowners would be evicted. No public notice unless the HOA defaulted. But if they rejected the offer, I would begin individual parcel enforcement via property liens. Starting with the clubhouse and working outward, they had 10 business days to respond. On day 6, they countered. We propose a buyout of the land for $1.2 million flat. My reply? Offer. Declined. I don't sell, I lease. That's when they started to unravel. Homeowners began resigning from the board. HOA leadership changed hands twice in a single month. Evan vanished from public view. Rumor said he moved out in the middle. Of the night, mortgage sold back to the bank. And me? I didn't gloat. I didn't post online. I simply filed the lease agreement with the county. Sealed. Valid. Untouchable. The moment it all became real, when they installed a plaque near the clubhouse. A quiet little thing mounted in the garden. Leased by agreement with Mr. Davis Reed in recognition of legacy, law, and land. I stood there one morning, coffee in hand, and smiled. The homes stood. The families remained. The street signs didn't change. But everyone in Pine Ridge, Phase the Through now knew, every footstep they took, walked on land that was not theirs, and I was no longer invisible. The ink had barely dried on the lease agreement when I received a visit. 3 members of the newly restructured HOA board stood on my porch, nervous, dressed too formally for a Tuesday morning, and clearly coached by someone with legal training, the New president, a woman named Clarissa Holloway, extended a hand. Mr. Reed, we're here in good faith. I nodded. Better late than never. They didn't ask to renegotiate. They didn't try to talk me down. They asked for stability. We want to assure the community that things are resolved, Clarissa said, that there won't be more surprises. I pulled out a single sheet of paper from my drawer, already prepared. Annual Certification of Peaceful Occupancy, Phase 3. A document stating that as long as the HOA remained in good standing, submitted lease payments on time, and made no further claims to ownership, I would issue a yearly certification stating no action would be taken. It wasn't legally necessary, but it was psychological gold. They signed it on the spot. What followed was a silent shift in the neighborhoods. Power dynamic. There were no banners, no headlines, no grand announcements, but every homeowner received a packet a week later with 2 key pages. A full survey of the Phase 3 development, a diagram of which homes sat partially or fully on parcel by lot 193 band in the footer of every page, land leased from Mr. Davis Reed, parcel owner number 1193B. It was more than documentation. It was a reminder. Every square foot they stepped on existed at the mercy of my signature. That year, I made $186,000 in rental income from the lease. By year 2, with inflation indexing, that number rose to $198,430. By year 5, well, let's just say the neighborhood paid me more annually than most executive salaries in town, and it cost me nothing but time, patience, and being underestimated. I reinvested every dollar into silent ventures, purchased 2 more parcels. On the north side of the county, created a land trust under a new holding name, let a new developer build luxury homes on land I already knew had historic easement issues, because apparently nobody reads old land records anymore. But here's where things got even more interesting. The HOA tried to quietly sell the clubhouse to a private events company to generate income. But they forgot one thing. Any improvements or subleases on leased land required my written consent, which I denied. So the HOA came back asking if I'd reconsider for a one-time payout. I said sure, under one condition: they add a second plaque, directly on the clubhouse front. This building stands on leased ground, property of Mr. Davis Reed. They laughed nervously. I didn't. The plaque went up 3 weeks later, and the event company deal? It died the same day, because no client wants to host a wedding in a place that says someone else owns the dirt under their feet. Then came the zoning committee. Someone, likely a board member, tried to push a quiet rezone to challenge the easement. Terms, a clever move on paper. But the moment I got wind of it, I attended the zoning meeting. Public comment time. No drama. Just truth. I pulled out the original deed, the filed lease, the certified survey, and I read one line into the microphone. Attempts to rezone active leased land constitute legal bad faith under Municipal Development Code 4.3.7. The room froze, and then I added, any rezone attempt will trigger immediate lease revocation. Good luck explaining that to your mortgage holders. The motion died before the meeting ended. HOA life went on. Barbecues, dog walkers, holiday lights, but every HOA budget meeting now had a line item titled Land Lease Obligations, Parcel 1193B. Sometimes I'd walk through Phase 3 just for fun, not to gloat, to remind myself what it means to fight without shouting. Neighbors greeted me differently now. Some tipped their hats. Some asked advice. One teenage kid said, "You're like Batman, but with land." I laughed, but part of me knew he wasn't wrong. Then, about 18 months after the lease went into effect, Clarissa returned. "Mr. Reed, we've had a vote. The HOA would like to explore converting the lease to a long-term equity partnership. In plain terms, they wanted to buy in, not buy out. They were done pretending they owned the land. Now they wanted to share it legally. It was flattering. But I declined. I don't sell what they tried to steal." She nodded, expecting that answer. Still, it marked the final shift. No more games. No more positioning. Just a community living, quietly under a truth they'd never forget. The best part? I never had to raise my voice, never had to protest, never posted a single rant online. I let them believe they won, let them build, let them boast. And then, when it was all finished, I showed them the foundation still belonged to me. 2 years passed, and not one lease payment was late. Not one zoning challenge was filed, not one complaint from the homeowners about the yearly certification of peaceful occupancy. It was like Pine Ridge Phase 3 had finally accepted what it was, a high-end suburb, built on land they didn't own. And I, Davis Reed, the invisible landowner they tried to ignore, had become a permanent footnote in their foundation. But I never weaponized it. I never walked around like I ruled anything, because real power doesn't announce itself. It just collects the rent. I kept my habits simple. Morning walks around the perimeter, coffee on the porch, occasional chats with the newer homeowners who, Often found me more neighborly than the HOA itself. One day, a man in his early 30s stopped me outside Lot 47. "Hey, you're the land guy, right?" I smiled. "That's me." He grinned nervously. "I just bought this place. Heard the rumors. Didn't know if they were true." "They're true," I said. "But you're good. Long as the lease holds, your title stays clean." He looked down at the grass, then up again. Kind of wild to think the HOA doesn't own the ground under their own clubhouse. I just shrugged. "Paperwork matters," he laughed. "Guess you're the only guy who ever beat an HOA without lifting a finger," I corrected him. Not without lifting a finger, just without raising my voice. That year, Pine Ridge tried to launch a community rebranding campaign, modernize the neighborhood. Fresh identity, they called it. New signs, new logo, new promotional material for prospective buyers. The marketing firm presented a fancy slogan, Pine Ridge Phase 3, where ownership begins. I filed a quiet complaint to the County Advertising Commission. Attached to it were the land lease documents. The ruling, false advertising. The campaign was shut down in 11 days. New motto, Pine Ridge Phase the 3rd, proudly planned, privately grounded. They didn't ask for my input. They didn't need to. But I saw the quiet bow in the phrasing, and that was enough. You'd think a story like this would go viral. A guy traps an HOA legally, earns 6 figures annually, and turns an entire subdivision into tenants without lifting a hammer. But I never gave interviews, never went public. Because this wasn't a revenge story, it was a generational one. You see, my father left me that land with a warning. Don't sell to anyone who disrespects the dirt. The moment they act like they're above it, make sure they end up beneath it. I followed that advice, and now, Pine Ridge stood on 33 acres of a promise they never saw coming. One spring morning, Clarissa Holloway invited me to the annual HOA appreciation brunch. Polite move, symbolic gesture. I went, not to speak, just to observe. The clubhouse was spotless, flowers trimmed, tables full of catered breakfast. Clarissa handed me a coffee and whispered, "Thank you." "For what?" I asked. "For being the first person to ever check our arrogance without destroying everything." I nodded. "Your board didn't need destruction. It needed boundaries." She smiled. "That's what land gives us, right? Boundaries." I raised my cup. "That and rent." We both laughed. Toward the end of the brunch, a young couple approached. "Mr. Reed?" the woman asked. "Our son just turned 12. He's learning about land ownership in school. Would you ever consider speaking to his class?" I blinked. Of all the things I'd expected that morning, being asked to teach land ethics to middle schoolers wasn't one. But I said yes. 3 weeks later, I stood in a classroom full of wide-eyed kids, holding up a laminated plat map and a deed from 1973. "You don't need to be loud to be powerful," I told them. "You need to know where your lines are, and you need to protect them. Quietly, patiently, and with proof." A kid in the front row raised his hand. "So, like a land ninja?" I chuckled. "Exactly like that." Over time, my story bled into local legend. New realtors whispered it. To buyers. "You know this part of Pine Ridge sits on leased land, right? One man owns it all." HOA board members came and went, but every president had the same meeting on their calendar every March. Meet with Mr. Reed, review lease renewal. It was never contested, never questioned, because now it was tradition. And then came the moment I knew it had all come full circle. A homeowner named Maria sent me a handwritten note. "Mr. Reed, we're planting a community garden behind lot 52. We'd like your blessing since it crosses the lease line. You've done so much for this place. Thank you for protecting what mattered, even when we didn't understand it. With respect, Maria and the Pine Ridge Garden Committee." Enclosed was a little hand-drawn map, a few carrots, some sunflowers, a bench. I walked out there that afternoon, saw a few kids digging holes. One of them waved. I waved back. And for the first time in years, I realized they weren't walking on my land anymore. They were walking on protected land, and that made all the difference. You want to know what power really looks like? It's not screaming at meetings, it's not lawsuits or cameras or viral videos. It's standing on your porch while the world builds over your name. And knowing eventually, they'll have to say it out loud, because justice doesn't always wear a robe. Sometimes it wears muddy boots and carries a file folder. They built over me, ignored me, tried to own me. But I didn't fight to tear anything down. I just waited and let them finish building my income stream.